All right. Hello, LinkedIn and YouTube. We are live again today, and I have a special guest, Bernard Marr, who's going to join me in the session. We're going to talk about the future post-COVID-19. I think it's an extremely relevant topic, and I'm really excited to talk to Bernard Marr. I'm actually going to bring him into the stage right now. Hello, Bernard.
Hi, Kate.
How's it going?
Very good. I'm excited. This is my first live stream with you, so I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. It's so great to have you here. And, before we start getting into the topic, I do want to congratulate you on your new book. And I'm just going to pull it up here. You've got the Tech Trends in Practice that recently came out. Can you tell people a little bit about, why you wrote this book and what can they expect to see in there?
Okay, thank you. I wasn't prepared for that question. So basically, what I wanted to do in this book is to write a book that I always wanted to read. That really says or explains in really simple terms what are the biggest technology trends. So I talk about some of the trends you would expect, like artificial intelligence and big data, but I also have trends like gene editing and material science that is now making a big impact, and trends like 3D printing. So what I try to do is to look at what are actually the 25 technology trends that will define the next 10 years, because 2020 seemed like a good idea to do this. And I have a chapter on each of those tech trends and how they're impacting businesses and how can businesses actually use it and are already using these technologies in practice.
That's great. You said 2020 is a good year to do this. So what's interesting is back in the day, people used to think of 2020 as this futuristic time where we'll have all these flying cars, right? And all this great advances. And now people are fighting in stores over toilet paper. I just think it's pretty funny that we're in the future, but are we really?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a very difficult and crazy time for the entire world at the moment. Who would have thought when I wrote those books, and when I wrote this book, and it is now coming out in the middle of this pandemic. So it's interesting times.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, that's a good question to start with. How has your daily life been impacted with COVID-19, and where are you located? How are things looking over there?
Okay, I'm based in England, just half an hour outside of London. I'm at home, as you can see, but my home office is home for me anyway. I tend to work from home, either work from home or travel somewhere to clients. So I'm used to this, and I felt lucky that my setup was already there. And in terms of my daily work, what is interesting is I've got 3 kids between the ages of 8 and 14. My middle one is 12, and that can be a challenge juggling all of this. Normally they go off to school in the morning, and I then get a good chunk of time by myself working. And my older 2 are very independent, so their school is very good. They give them a daily workload that they can do online, but my 8-year-old needs some help. And so my wife is a teacher, so every week, so one week she is at school looking at kids of key workers, and every other week she is here. And those weeks when she is not here, this is quite hard, because I basically spend half my day just doing some of the homework and homeschooling with my youngest.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. I have 2 kids. I mean, only one is in an actual school, the other one's in a preschool, ages 4 and 5. But I can see how the 8-year-old can be even more difficult than the 5-year-old, because the 5-year-old doesn't have that much to do, right? It's just basic writing and reading and some math. Yeah. At age 8, you're doing some real stuff.
Yeah, exactly. No. And it took a bit of time for the schools to adjust to all of this as well. So in the beginning, they were bombarding them with work, and now they've adjusted this a little bit.
Yes. Oh, glad to hear that. You guys are coping, and I'm sure it helps that your wife is a teacher, because she just knows how to teach. We're not teachers here, so.
No, and I thought I'm not bad, but my God, it's such a difference just watching and listening to her when she does it and when I do it. So anyway, and my 14-year-old daughter is very good. So what she does is last week she organized theme evenings every night. So we had a red carpet day. So that was the first one. So we all dressed up in black tie. She
Oh, wow.
transformed our dining room into this restaurant, and she cooked and served us meal. And then we had a premiere watching a movie. So, and every night we had one night we had a games night, a sports night. So that is nice as well.
Wow, that sounds really nice.
I'm actually, partly it's frustrating, partly I'm really enjoying the family time that I'm getting.
Yeah, I think absolutely it has brought us a lot closer together as a family, because I've had personally so many travel plans for conferences, and I run marathons, so I had, a lot of travel plans, and now all of that has been canceled. We're all home. My husband's also working from home, and a lot more time to bond and spend quality time together.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, what I think will hopefully come out of this is that we will do a little bit less travel. What I find is that I spend so much time on an aeroplane going to meetings that are not really necessary sometimes. So I've especially after this lockdown, I've had some really successful virtual events. Or sometimes I pre-recorded things, and I had really good board meetings over Zoom and other platforms. And sometimes, for me, this really questions, why do I sometimes get on a plane really early in the morning, fly to another country to sit in a board meeting, and then fly back at night, when I can actually do this as well over video call?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did have a question around that, right? Virtual meetings versus in-person meetings. You said you've had some good experiences. Can you share a few tips on, what made those meetings better than maybe some other virtual meetings that you had?
Yeah, I don't think there's any best practice as yet properly. But one of the examples I was talking about in one of my articles is that I regularly attend sessions at the Parliament in England. So in London, which is obviously a great thing. I love going to the building because it's such a epic building. You then sit in one of the discussion rooms, which feels great. But they have issues of how many people they can sit. So normally in these conference rooms, you can only sit 100 people. And the last few ones that we did digitally, we had thousands of people attending from all over the world. And this can only be a good thing. So
Yes.
what I see in the future is a lot more hybrid events where we might do parts of it in person if we can justify it. So for me, what the reason I would go and want to attend as an attendee a live event is to have a real experience. So this whole experience economy that we are seeing. So if they provide some really good entertainment, great experiences, then it's worth going. If they just put me into a conference room to sit there to listen to someone give presentations, I actually much rather do this from home, because I don't have to travel anywhere. I can listen in a much more relaxed environment. I can pause it and restart it when I need to. So for me, for conference organizers, I think it's a real opportunity to rethink how they best package their events.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the accessibility part of it, right, where a lot more people can attend, you can, cut costs a little bit for those that are attending virtually, and just make this accessible to a lot more people. I recently attended the Open Data Science Conference, and they had to make the switch fairly quickly, because it was probably last week that I attended, and COVID just happened. The shutdowns happened about a month or two ago. And I think they did a great job. They even had some gamification where you can actually see little people walking around like you would normally see at the expo hall. You get to select where do you want to go next. And, they have the swag bags where you can download PDF brochures from the sponsors. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there for, conferences that can innovate and do things differently to make this a better experience. Yep. So I think a big topic, and then I'm going to switch and check any comments that have come in or questions that are coming in on LinkedIn. But what I want to really get into is right now in terms of careers and skill sets, right? I think we're at a time when things are really changing, and there are still people that are graduating from college or about to graduate. We're in April, typically graduations in May and June. What should those people be looking for? What should they be doing? How can they get jobs? What careers should they be applying to?
Very good question. And so for me, this must be quite scary time to graduate, because we are entering something that we've never experienced before, and no one can predict exactly what the job market will look like. What I hope will happen is that we'll get over this pretty quickly. Things will go back to normal, and because there's nothing wrong with the economy and businesses, so hopefully they will go back to normal. For me, if I was graduating now, I would try to volunteer, just to get some work, and use this lockdown as a real opportunity to increase your skills, and hopefully and help to and focus on building your own brand. So get your LinkedIn profile going, share some of your articles, share some of your thoughts, network, make connections in the industry to stand out. And for me, one thing that will definitely happen is that we will see a fast-tracked digital transformation. So we'll have businesses that will focus more on making sure that they actually transform digitally, that they fast-track things like artificial intelligence, big data, automation, robotics, all of those things. So for me, if I was a graduate now, I would focus on things like adaptability, flexibility, building up my tech savviness, actually understanding some of the major tech trends and their impact on the business, and focusing on skills that I've talked about for a long time that will, I believe, become even more important. Things like data literacy, skills like critical thinking. We now get bombarded with fake news. Is really important that people have this ability to look at data, look at sources, and understand where this data has come from. Can we trust this data? And then think like digital skills, digital marketing, coding skills, and leadership. So for me, a really good thing to focus on for anyone graduating now is the things that robots and AIs and machines can't do as well as we can. And actually focusing on the human element is really important. So interpersonal communication skills, emotional intelligence, all of these things where we as humans still have an edge, and they will stay really relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just reading through some of the LinkedIn comments. I see Trip Parker said, yes, definitely communication skills. So he's agreeing with you. There was a comment from Dr. Julia Zucro that came in that asks, what are your views on COVID-19's influence on data literacy and data readiness in companies? Do you think we're at a point where companies are ready for this? And is COVID-19 potentially triggering a new age of openness to facts and figures? Do you think there'll be an impact on that?
I see one level of impact I'm seeing is in businesses. So those businesses that have moved to a cloud infrastructure, that have enabled remote working before, that give people the tools to access data from home, they are in a much better position nowadays. Those that have still got their data in their data silos on premise somewhere without being able to access it, they have a real problem. Mm-hmm. In terms of increased transparency, I hope that this will happen, but I also have my doubts. I hope that we will have more sharing, we'll have more actually live data and data monitoring and more transparency. So this is not going to be the last pandemic we will experience in the world. So how do we make sure this doesn't happen in the same way again, that we can actually respond to this much quicker? And for this, we need transparency, we need accountability, we need systems in place where we monitor this and share this. And for me, things like big data and AI will play vital roles in all of this, together with political will. And I guess we see this at the moment, that the reason why I said I'm doubtful is that you see the rhetoric, the fake news spreading between the US administration and China of who has said what and who to believe and whether the numbers are right or not. So it would be nice to have a more transparent system in place that we can all trust. And for me, maybe even having an app in place. So one of the reasons why China, for example, has been successful in tackling the virus is that they have monitored people. They know where you are. They once you've been tested, you then have an app that indicates that you are clear. If you have been identified as someone that has the virus, they can then contact trace you using the app. Obviously, we have some privacy concerns around all of this. This needs to be managed really well. But for me, blockchain technology has a real potential here. So if we build a really solid blockchain-based app that we all have control of, but that shows our COVID status, our pandemic status in the future, and that allows people to track where we've been, who we've been in contact with, that I think would be really powerful.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That's actually one of the key topics I wanted to talk about was surveillance and human right to privacy, right? Because I think the positive side of things, right, with surveillance and being able to know where people have been and who have they spoken to and interacted with is great from a data perspective. But what are your thoughts on how this impacts your personal privacy rights?
For me, is striking a fine balance here. And I think countries like China are maybe not getting the balance right, but other countries that say, okay, we don't want any control, no data collection, also don't get this right. So for me, it's about putting a system in place. So in the UK, for example, the government has recently commissioned the national health system here. So this is an organization that everyone trusts. It is not really controlled by the government, but funded by the government to develop an app similar to, I think, what the Chinese have developed. But this is not controlled directly by the government. So this is probably a quite good idea. The challenge is, how do we then give people control over this? How do we make sure that the government can't exploit this data and suddenly find out where we are, what our views are, politically, and so on, and some of the things that we see come out of China. So I think getting the balance right is really tricky. But yeah, so I don't know the answer exactly. I know that technology will make a big difference. It can make a real difference in us fighting this pandemic, and will make a difference in us fighting this pandemic, any future pandemics. So we need systems in place. So if we can find a way of collecting this data, creating a trustworthy app, and giving people control over the data, like a blockchain-based system, that would be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And Naive has a comment on that technologies are only the enablers, and most importantly is how do we actually use them strategically. So, technology will definitely help things, but it's all about how you use it in a positive or in a negative way. You mentioned some countries are doing it right, some countries are not doing it right. Do you have a country in mind that you think is, has found that right balance?
I'm not sure. And I don't think I know enough about the details of some of the systems they're using. I know a little bit about the Chinese system. But people have talked about countries like Taiwan and Singapore, who seem to have a really good grasp on the virus at the moment, and they use technology very effectively. I know that in the UK, what they did is the government basically used anonymized data from the telecom companies to just look at how people are actually adhering to the lockdown, just to look at movement data, how many people are traveling in cars, where they're going. And again, this is a way that governments can use this data, but as long as it's not personally identifiable, this is all good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, an interesting question came in from Akiko. Says COVID-19 is leading organizations and governments to liberate more data for research and for cures. Do you think this will continue once the pandemic is over?
I hope so. I've always been a big advocate for sharing and open data. One of my friends, Professor Maya Schoenberger from Oxford University, has again often talked about the need actually for companies to share some of the data, because one of the concerns he has always talked about is that if companies have these massive monopolies of data, companies like Google and Facebook, should we maybe force them to share 10% of their data to make it publicly accessible? And I think that would be nice, but obviously you have to balance this with intellectual property rights and other legal requirements and privacy requirements. But I think it would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit to remote work, right? Most of the non-essential workers who can continue doing their job have started to do it remotely. And my question to you is, how do you think employers, once this whole thing is over and people are allowed to go back and social distancing rules are relaxed, how do you think employers will be able to convince their workers to continue coming back to the office when they were effectively working for X number of months that we were under this lockdown?
Yeah, I don't think they can, and yeah. I have felt this for such a long time. I find it crazy that I have some friends that work in companies where they're basically forced to drive for an hour and a half to sit in an office, when they can do this as effectively, if not more effectively, from home. So again, for me, what this crisis has done, it has just fast-tracked this. So many people now have used video conferencing for the first time. They've had Zoom calls and team calls, and they realize actually these things work quite well. And so for me, I don't think you can justify this. And hopefully one of the things that will come out of this is that we'll have more home working, more remote working. And this is something I've done for a very long time now. And I always find this bizarre that companies employ someone and then don't trust them to do the work, and only trust that they would do the work when they're actually physically in an office building somewhere. This is, I think, very outdated.
Yeah, I agree. And, I've been working remotely for about 4 or 5 years. So for me, it hasn't been a big change as well. But for most of the folks that I've spoken to that have started to work remotely, that were either unable to before or were not interested, now are all saying how much they love it, because it provides you so much more time back to your schedule, right? That you don't have to commute. Most of the time you eat a healthier meal because you can make your own food, you're home. So I think there's a lot of positives that can come out of this. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on remote work. Now I want to shift to remote schooling, right? Like you said, you have firsthand experience in this, where you have 3 kids that are in school right now. Do you think that there'll be a shift to more online schooling and less in-person classrooms?
Again, I hope so. I hope that we'll get the balance right. I am also a governor of one of the schools that my kids go to, which is a very big school with thousands of kids. And we've been talking about this for a while now. And for me, the schools have been quite slow, and universities have been quite slow at adopting some of this technology that we can now use. And for me, the schooling system that we have in most countries is one that was okay maybe 100 years ago, where we didn't know any better. Now we have amazing technology, and for me it doesn't make sense that I have 20, 30 kids sitting in a room listening to a teacher, then doing some work. I think what we need to get the balance between is having some AI-enabled apps that allow me individually to learn, and then actually using the space that we have in school, the physical spaces, to have people work together, to collaborate, to give them the opportunities to develop these really important social skills and communication skills, to give them team working skills, and give them the ability to create and be creative. And this is even something I've seen now with my kids. One of the side effects of being at home 24 hours a day is that my kids now don't have lunch at school, but we have it together. So it's an extra meal. And actually, I spend so much time cooking with my kids, which is really nice too.
Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that. I think there definitely is the right balance. And what I'm noticing is right now, so I school my children for 2 hours a day, and I feel like that's more than enough of time basically learning concepts for smaller kids. Obviously, it probably you need to dedicate more time as your kids grow older, and especially for universities, colleges. But I think it allows you to do just so much more in life, even as a kid, right? We go outside, play in the backyard, they can explore, they can ride their scooters or run around and just be kids, which is great, as opposed to sitting in a seat for 8 hours a day waiting for your turn to get some attention from your teacher.
Yeah, and I think getting the balance right is really difficult for schools over the next 10 years, making this transition. So what you will have is you have AI-enabled apps that know exactly what level you are in math. They can send you the next task. They can watch how well you're doing at it. We can then use some gamification as part of this process. And then actually teachers can pick up from there and give people even the one-to-one attention to exactly the problem they have. And at the moment, if you have 20, 30 kids in a classroom, you can't monitor everyone to that sort of level. And we've seen that in sports that this is happening, that we're now using much more data and AI-enabled systems to monitor athletes and improve their performance. And hopefully we'll do the same with our children in our school. At the same time, giving them the opportunities to be children and enjoy school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think fully online is not going to work either. So I agree that there definitely is a balance, because I'm on this school leadership team for my daughter's class, and we have a teenage boy who's part of the committee as well. And he was giving us his feedback. And I mean, I'm not going to name him, but he said, this whole thing is dumb. I miss my friends. The teacher just takes attendance every half an hour, and we just, she sends us an email with what to do, and we do it. There's no interaction. So I think we definitely have to work on getting this right. It'll probably take a couple of years to find that balance.
Absolutely.
All right, a couple more questions. We have a lot of questions actually coming in, and I'm just trying to pick and choose a couple. So there's one from Nabil who is asking, what is your view on open data standards? Should they be mandated? Otherwise, it'll be lip service and continuation with proprietary systems. So open data standards. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have open data standards. I'm not sure you need to mandate them. I believe that in the end, companies that want to be successful will enter open data standards and make their product and their databases and their connectors relevant. And so we now see much more multi-cloud environments, much more, every company has tons of different applications, and those that try to keep this as proprietary standards, I don't think will survive in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we need them. They will automatically happen, I believe. And at the moment, you still see a few companies trying to focus on their proprietary systems. But I think in the long run, those that focus on open data sharing standards will thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Foresee that shift as well. I'll put some money on that bet. So question from Matt Thompson. He asks, will the coronavirus also change the emotional relationship of people with their business and employer, purpose, mission, vision, and deeds?
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for the question. I think it will. And I'm not sure it is the coronavirus that will make this happen. I think this is, again, a shift that we have seen for a long time, that people want a more emotional connection with their work. They want to, I wouldn't want to work for a business that I don't believe in. I think having a clear vision, having ethics is so vitally important in the technology space that I work in. I have those discussions so many times. And businesses that have the right ethical frameworks and they have the right organizational cultures and the right vision, they will be the ones that attract employees in the future. What I see is that I guess one of the things that will happen after or during this pandemic is that we will see even a stronger shift towards the gig economy, where companies will want to de-risk themselves and say, okay, we want to have fewer people directly employed. And for me, this is good and bad at the same time for employees, because in bad times, they can get rid of you very quickly. But also it means that companies have to there's a real incentive for companies to build an employer brand that people are attracted by. So if you're competing for talent, and even after the COVID crisis, every company will still be competing for the top talent. You need to have a good employer brand, and this comes with having the right vision, the right organizational culture. So yes, it will continue on the track that is already it already was, but it will probably accelerate this slightly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think COVID-19 is accelerating a lot of the trends that were predicted for the future, because people simply the companies have no choice but to adapt, right? Like the working from home and virtual meetings and that kind of stuff. Speaking of businesses, another question I had for you was, there's so much talk of layoffs, either from people posting online that, I've been let go or furloughed. And I wanted to ask, do you have any advice for companies that are facing, struggles right now because they're unable to make sales or, increase their revenue at this point? What can they do in terms of cost cutting or, creative solutions to avoid layoffs in this period?
Yeah, so for some of those measures, unfortunately, it is too late for some businesses already. So I in my job, I help companies with their strategy, and I help them put performance management systems in place. And what I see is that those companies that have really strong performance management systems and a really good strategic focus, they tend to weather the storm much better than others. Mm-hmm. So what is important is that you have a very good grasp on your numbers and your data. So if companies really understand where is their income coming from, where are the profits, do they have cash flow, how long is this lasting, this is really important. And monitoring data. So again, the more data companies have, the better they are able to shift channels. They will understand where customers are stopping to buy their products, when they see shifts between different products and services and demand dropping and rising. So for me, that's a good way to do this, and also be creative. In any crisis, there are also huge opportunities for businesses. So a car racing team, the Mercedes Formula One team in the UK, what they've done is they actually used some of their manufacturing plants to produce innovative ventilators. Now we see a global shortage of PPE equipment. So again, if you are a business that can help, there will be ongoing demand for this for some time. So shifting your revenue streams is quite good. And then for me, having strong customer relationships is also important. So those, and this is sometimes something that companies get, or they cut marketing budgets and budgets on social media. And I've written about this quite a lot, that actually those companies who double down on this, they focus on marketing, they focus on building true relationships with their customers, keeping them informed and engaged. Those are the ones that are much more likely to survive throughout the pandemic, but also much more likely to thrive afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So put the customer first, and I'd say the employees as well, right?
Absolutely. And then I think fast tracking automation is another thing that there's a real opportunity. So if I had a big business now, this is what I would focus on. I would get my employees to make sure we have those automated systems in place that will make sure that if another pandemic comes along, we are in a much better position. And it will also make us much more competitive once the pandemic is over. So really looking at your own business processes. Again, what I do with organizations when we look at their strategies, we look at this strategically and say, okay, what are actually your most important business processes? Where do you spend most of your time and money as a business? And how can you streamline this? How can you make this more effective, more efficient? And this is another great way of spending your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all really good tips. And I think if if people have heard these tips a year ago, they would be in a much better place today.
I know.
It's late for some, right? But they'll be more prepared for the next pandemic.
Absolutely, but again, tackling some of these things now, actually getting back onto social media to get in touch with your customers, building a strong employer brand, looking at your processes. These are all things we can do right now, and they're more important than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question kind of shifts us back to our careers and skills discussion, but Philip wanted to ask, where do you think the near-term future job market is for a data scientist?
I think it's going to be amazing, and I think it's going to be more important than ever. For me, some of the technology trends that I'm seeing, the fast tracking of automation, but also the fast tracking of data, using data to inform decision making, using data to make more intelligent products and services, using data to improve your processes. All of this will become much more important. So if you are in data science, I think this is a very safe future job prospect for you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And then Christopher Bishop has a question for you. He says, history says that innovative companies lead during a crisis and take the opportunity to innovate. So he wants to know, what are Bernard's thoughts on how to do this? Pretty broad, but let's hear your thoughts. How can a company innovate in this time of crisis?
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. And I think for me, a lot of the things I've talked about before involve innovation, where you say, okay, you can have innovation around your products and services. So, and it's interesting, two different experiences that I'm going through with some of my publishers at the moment. So I have another book coming out later in the year, and that publisher basically shut down its operation almost completely, got rid of about 90% of their staff, and basically said, we will start again once this pandemic is over. Where the other one has said, actually, let's really focus on digital. Let's push those books out because people want to read. They have now probably some spare time to read and improve their knowledge. And for me, seeing this as an opportunity, thinking about your own product, so if you and your own services, how any of this fast tracking or everything I can do now will happen automatically. We will, over the next 10 years, we will see a shift towards more digital events. We will see a shift towards more digital education, towards more digital reading, anything. And so this is definitely an area that I would focus on. Innovation around my products and services. The other area is obviously innovation around your own business processes. So I live in Milton Keynes, and one of the services that we've been using a lot is a robot delivery service. So I'm lucky that I live in a town that offers this. So we have Starship robots that deliver from our local grocery shop and even from our restaurants locally. And this is a great opportunity. So if I was initially our local fish and chip shop, typical English, they shut down and basically say, okay, this is all too much for us. We can't really cope with this. We can't social distance our employees. They have now reopened, and they're now using those robots to make those deliveries. And they're making and so again, finding those opportunities, thinking, how can I improve my own business processes? And so innovation is absolutely vital. I think it's the biggest resource we have as human beings, our creativity and being able to innovate. And in a pandemic and any crisis, those companies that focus on this will only come out the other end even better prepared and performing better.
Yeah, absolutely. On the note of robots, I did want to talk a little bit about this because, for some time now, people, society in general, have kind of feared the fact that robots will come and take our jobs. And I think at this point in time, we're all hoping that we could have those robots who are, doing the things that we either can't do, like delivering food, like you mentioned in your example, but also, I think in the future we'll have robots that can go and, clean and sanitize hospitals, for example, that we don't have to put human lives at risk to do these types of jobs. So I think I'm pretty optimistic in terms of robotics, helping us in the future. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there'll be an increase in the use of robots in our everyday lives?
Yeah, so when I was talking about the increased automation, this is exactly what I meant, that we'll have more robots. So again, those companies that are doing extremely well at the moment are companies like Amazon that have automated warehouses. Is those robot delivery companies that their demand has absolutely gone through the roof. I've used them now for the last 5 years, and they have become part of our normal life. So when we used to sit and watch a movie at night, and my daughter would say, "Hey, Dad, can I have some popcorn?" And the first thing is, let's ask the robot to bring us some. and now we're doing our entire shopping using the robot. So this will just naturally increase, and if you think any future pandemic, the more we can remove people out of our factories and our supply chains, the more resilient they will become. There's obviously another challenge. I've just written a Forbes article about the fact that actually the pandemic is also opening the door to other threats like cyber attacks. So if this wasn't an actual pandemic, but a cyber pandemic, then suddenly we would shift completely the other way. We would say, okay, we don't want, the robots are not working, the internet is not working, we now need to have physical meetings and physical shops. So it's also dangerous for companies to make the shift completely. And but I think it's important to, and this will accelerate, this will continue. We'll see more robots, we'll see more drones, we'll self-driving cars. If we now had self-driving cars on the road, social distancing wouldn't be a problem. We could still be driving around safely. So this is all going to be fast-tracked, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I read an article where they've used drones to deliver, testing kits and ventilators and other things to areas that needed it in emergency, and that would not have been possible, if you had to have an actual person go out. It would be possible, I guess, but you're putting people at risk, and sometimes that also makes things take longer than they should.
Absolutely, and we've seen this in China, where hospitals have done exactly this. They've used robots to disinfect wards. They use robots to apply medicine and distribute medicine. They've used drones to fly testing kits around. So we will see more of that.
Yes.
We would have seen this anyway, but I think it will fast track it.
Yeah, and Christopher said, great insight, the examples of the 2 different publishing companies. So he said, thanks for that. We've got a question from Alistair Moore. He's asking do you see value in having quality data in the business moving forward? Is this becoming more important? Is it being fast-tracked as well by COVID?
This is Alistair, did you say?
Yes, Alistair.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. No, and I guess you know the answer already. Sounds like a loaded question. So yes, the answer is quality data is always important. And even though I think technology is coming to help us, we now have databases that can assess data quality itself. They can autonomously improve data quality, and they can even help us to make decisions based on not so clean data. But obviously, the more quality data you have, the better your decisions are, the better your processes are, and for me, it's a vital part of this whole digitization.
Right. Thank you. Yes, I think data quality has been important, will be important, and it will always be important. So, okay, great. The question from Jennifer Cooper, she asks, what are your thoughts on the battle for truth in the age of fake news? There's to be more division each day, and she's wondering what role data science can play in holding politicians and media more accountable.
Yeah, and this is something that definitely worries me. The ability of artificial intelligence and generative design to create so realistic fake news. So we can now have presidents making announcements that most of us can't distinguish from whether they're real or not. And AI can now do this. They can now automatically spread them on the social on social networks. So for me, critical thinking is ever more important, thinking about where things have come from. But I also feel so technology, AI is being used to make this happen. AI can now write amazing newspaper articles that look very real but are fake. And they can even generate videos and voice recordings. What is going to happen is that we will also use AI to counterbalance all of this. So there's lots of exciting stuff happening where we can now use AI to understand where has news come from, for example. So there are a number of social media sites, for example, are now experimenting with this, saying, okay, this has been shared, but we don't believe this is coming from a trustworthy source. They then give people the opportunity to check where this has come from. I believe in the future, AI will be able to hopefully help us detect fake news, fake videos, and so on. So I unfortunately, there is a bit of a tech battle going on between evil and good. And I think what we need as humans is the ability to have this critical thinking and this ability to understand where messages are coming from, where news are coming from, what the data actually says. Again, data literacy is becoming even more important because lots of the statistics that we hear politicians use are again not very reliable, and it's important that we have intelligent people that can see through this, and machines will help with this, but I think the key resource is people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm surprised every time I see that this, the deep fakes, and even today I was scrolling through LinkedIn, not sure how real this was. I didn't really dig into it, but it looks like it could be real, where you're able to remove a person from let's say there's a video or live stream or something, you can remove me completely, even though I'm here. So it's kind of like making people invisible. So many new advances that I think are great, but at the same time could potentially be scary if it's in the wrong hands.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. All right. Let's see. Plenty of comments and questions. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I had a question for you. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but we're talking about the future post-COVID. How far into the future are you thinking we need to be thinking about for this pandemic to be over?
If
I need
only,
time, please. So
if only I knew that. Being a bit of a data geek, I obviously monitor all the different data sets that are coming out most days, and I look at trends. And what I see in most Western economies is that we've now passed the peak, and things seem to be getting better. So I really hope that by the time we get to June, things will start to open up. I think they will open up gradually. I think my wife was suggesting we have a street party when this is all over, but I don't think it will be like, okay, now it's all finished.
right.
So I think there will be a gradual opening of certain sectors. I could imagine that sectors like the travel industry will suffer for a little longer, because putting people on planes without knowing whether they are already resistant to COVID and have had it or not is quite dangerous. So I don't know the answer, like all of us, but I hope that by the summer we will definitely see things starting to get back to normal.
Well, I think that's a very optimistic statement, right? This summer will be here in a couple of months, right? So
yes.
Okay, let's see. A lot of thank yous to you for responding to people's questions, and Jennifer says thank you for the thoughtful answer, and a lot of discussions happening with individuals in the chat. There is a question from Andrew. He's asking, what will be the next Airbnb, not hotels, or Uber, not taxis? Basically, what will be the next business disruptor, kind of like an Airbnb and Uber, that you think will happen after this pandemic?
again, if I knew the answer to this,
Oh man, this is
what there are lots of different areas that I particularly find exciting. One is medicine. I think if we can find a way of delivering healthcare to people really easily over the mobile phone, where you can get a diagnosis. A lot of this is already theoretically possible using AI, where I can diagnose most conditions. So if I have a skin rash and I want to know what it is, the AI can probably tell me 99% of the cases what this is. And then if I could have some advice using chatbots on potentially even real doctors on this, those for me, there's a huge opportunity in telemedicine. Another opportunity is automating supply chains. This we've already talked about this: robots, drones, autonomously driving cars and trucks. All of this is going to transform our world, and there are huge opportunities. And is some of the stuff that I find really exciting is when you see cities like Dubai that are already trialing self-driving, self-flying passenger drones. So there are definitely opportunities in the whole transport and supply chain sector. What other opportunities do I see? Esports is another big opportunity, I think. This is an area that is going to grow massively, and it's quite interesting. Now we have no live sports on on TV, and what we're seeing is in one of the biggest spectator sports in the world is Formula One car racing, and lots of their drivers are now taking part in virtual races, and they've actually here in the UK they're streaming them live on national TV, which is very interesting. So esports is another big growth area. And then the other one that I'm really excited about is virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. So we talked about some of those, especially around education. If we can find really useful, really good apps that help kids to learn in a much more immersive way. So instead of learning history in really dry history lessons where you say this is when this happened, you can actually put VR goggles on, you can enter those worlds, you can experience what it was like living in those in those times. For me, they are huge opportunities. So this is the whole area around virtual and augmented reality are huge opportunities and areas that I watch very closely.
Yeah, absolutely. I can just imagine, my kids learning history with the virtual reality goggles, and then saying, "Thank God, thank God, I'm born in this century, not not a long time ago."
Yeah.
But that would definitely be interesting. I'm picturing dinosaurs and all of this.
Yeah.
Way back then. So
And
I think
also mixed reality. I was in is my daughter plays the piano, for example, and what is happening now is that she is having her lesson virtually. So they're doing video calls, and this actually works quite well. And if you think about mixed reality, what you could potentially have is I could put a piano in front of me and play it in virtual reality. And this is with a teacher in the room with me, showing me exactly how to play. And this is super exciting. So companies that can crack this, I think will do very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the education space and even learning instruments, like you said, I think it's totally going to be transformed, where you no longer have to go physically be in person with somebody, and you can learn and pick up skills in an easier way with mixed and augmented and virtual reality. Question here from Anuj. He's asking, will the work culture be more easy in terms of dynamic and flexible after this pandemic? I know we touched on that a little bit more, but do you think companies will stop having office space? Will they reduce it by 50-60% and only have a couple of people actually come in? Do you see these major drastic changes actually taking place in terms of real estate and closing down offices?
Uh, I don't know, because a while. Thank you, Anush, for the question.
Great, we
Pardon?
find
It is a question that I would have predicted this to happen already. So if I was running a big company, I wouldn't have massive office buildings. At the same time, I think what is important is that companies that are trying to create a company culture and the right employment experience, they need to have social spaces where we can come together. And lots of people, I'm quite happy sitting in my office not seeing anyone, but there are lots of people that are not like me, who are social animals, who want to go out and mix with people, and they find it really difficult being in lockdown and working from home. So I think getting this balance right is hard. So I don't envisage seeing massive transformations really quickly, but I hope that this will again fast track and accelerate this transformation, where we'll see a better balance, more home working, and more flexibility, and also a change to company cultures where people are not forced to wear suits and ties to go to work, and where they can just be completely themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've kind of went over time, so I will ask one last question from the audience. From Trip Parker, he asks, "What about haircuts?"
That is a massive challenge, and you won't believe it. I cut my hair myself.
Okay, interesting.
I was actually we had normally our hairdresser comes to our house and she cuts my 3 kids and then my wife and me. And literally the day before the lockdown, my hairdresser was supposed to come round to our house, and I was nominated for a book award that was then live streamed on the internet. So we said, okay, we cancel this, we do this tomorrow and watch the book award as a family. So we all watched this, and then the next day we had the lockdown and no hairdressing took place. So and it is interesting. Today I also cut my dog's hair. So I think looking for how to cut your hair yourself is going to be a big hit on the internet.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
at the same time, I'm not sure I've done such a great job. So I can't wait for having my hair cut at some point. And I'm glad I'm not a woman that has a complicated haircut.
Well, actually, I think for women it's slightly simpler, right? I asked my husband, like, should I cut my hair? He's like, it always looks the same when you cut it. So who cares what you do with it?
Yeah, it's just a bit longer, yeah.
I think you did a great job, by the way. I would not be able to guess that you cut your hair by yourself. So congratulations on your success. Well, Bernard, thank you so much for, taking time out of your schedule to join me on this LinkedIn live stream. And, thanks for those who jumped in. I know we didn't address all the questions and comments. There were plenty that came in. We'll try to reply to them after this session. Definitely go on Amazon and check out Bernard Marr's new book. He has probably, over 20 books at this point? Is that
18.
18 books. You're very close. I know. I definitely read Data Strategy. That was a really great one. That's part of why I reached out to you a couple of years ago and, got to know you. But you do have like 1.5 million followers on LinkedIn. So if anyone's here that's currently not following Bernard Marr, I highly encourage that you do so on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and all social media. He puts out great content. So thank you again, Bernard.
Thank you. It's been really a lot of fun. And if anyone has any questions, I would be super happy to answer them. If they want to email me or message me directly on LinkedIn, I'm super happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.